Hello everyone, it's lovely to see you. So we're actually looking at parish records. So why do we? Well, they're actually vital to our research. It details births, marriages, burials, and I'm sure that most of you have looked at those at some stage. But the incumbents might write about the events that have taken place, what the weather was like, whether there were hailstones as big as tennis balls that ruined the crops. And that would have an effect on the village. So these are the important things. And this is before newspapers, so it is worthwhile. The vestry minutes and the church warden accounts tell us about community life, tells us about both the rich and the poor in the village. And the parish chest records, they give details on both. So what is a parish? Well, the dictionary definition, a community of sojourners, meaning they live there. It's the territorial subdivision of a diocese or a bishopric. It's a collection of people who attend a particular church. It could be Anglican after the Reformation, or Roman Catholic, or nonconformist. And of course you all know that they're Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, Quaker, Jewish, and any other of the religions that popped up from time to time. From a birth certificate or from a census, you may have learnt the place of birth. And that's what you need to look for. Well, is it a parish or is it a village within a parish? Use Lewis's topographical dictionary, which is in here probably on CD, but it is also now online at no cost. So you can look at that at home, and that will tell you the details of the parish and its ecclesiastic jurisdiction. A good book to use, which is found in here in the library on the shelves, also in the NZSG, is Philemore's Atlas. And the reason you use that is it shows the diocese. So you can see the pink and the yellow. The pink is the province of York, which is subservient to the province of Canterbury. And if people had land in Canterbury, that would their wills would be probated there. This is in the early days. But again, if it was on those borders, it could be in both. If they had land in both, then you'd find that it'll be in the senior, which is the province of Canterbury. So the area covered by a church is a parish. Now, it's called the Mother Church, where later on you find that they had to put extra churches, either to deal with overcrowded populations or the fact that the parish itself was too large. And this happens in Yorkshire and Lancashire in particular. Very, very large parishes, and the people just couldn't travel from one end of the parish of the county to the other to get there. So they created churches called chapels and chapels of ease. You couldn't get married in those churches, but you would get baptized and sometimes buried as well. But certainly marriages always had to be in the mother church. And an example of this is Manchester. Anyone who's got marriages before 1837 taking place in Manchester, they had to get married in Manchester Cathedral for a 50-mile radius. And that takes in northwest Derbyshire and North Cheshire. So it's a very large area, and if you can't find them in those areas, have a look at Manchester. So why did these living within these boundaries, they were required to go to church? By law? Yes, they were, especially after the Reformation. They had to go. They had to prove that they were now not Catholic, but Anglican, after Henry VIII changed and broke away from the Holy Church of Rome. By custom, because they like going to church, by inclination, and these vary from time to time. The Vicar General to Henry VIII ordered that every parish must keep a register, that every Sunday the parson, in the presence of the church wardens, must enter all the baptisms, marriages and burials from the previous week. What does that tell you? They might not quite remember their name. Was it Jack or was it John? Was it Anne or was it Annabelle? So errors would occur. Failure to comply, there was going to be a fine of 3 and 4p, and this was to be used spent on the church, but that didn't really, there's no records of that happening. Well, many parishes just ignored this. They didn't want this interference from London. it was received with suspicion. And so Edward the Sixth, he reenacted the act. It has to be. But by 1557, when Queen Mary was on the throne, and of course the religion changed back to being Roman Catholic, the clergy were instructed to name the godparents, bless their cotton socks, more information for us. And unfortunately, this wasn't kept on as an order through the ensuing years, but some vicars have, and I'll show you one later. By 1563, Elizabeth deemed that the records should be kept in great decent books of parchment, so they weren't on loose parchment papers for anyone to lose, or they got ripped, or they weren't on vellum any longer, so you've got all sorts of, vellum is the actual sheepskin, so you've got bits of leg and they write down the corners, and I've looked at those in London and they're just fantastic, but agony to read. So she also deemed that copies were to be made and sent to the bishop at the diocesan centre every Easter. And then that was really interesting because they're called the bishop's transcripts. So if the parish register has been lost, we have the chance of looking in a bishop's transcript. And so it was actually the mandates of 1597 and 1603 that enforced all these laws. The records were to be kept in a chest, fitted with 3 locks, 1 for the vicar and 2 for the church wardens. So all 3 had to be there to open them and get the records out. The chests were also used to keep the church plate in case there was, in times of war and battles and goodness knows what, and also the church garments. And these are 2 that are still extant, because not many parish chests have survived, but these are 2 lovely ones. They're both black and they're woven, which is just amazing. So christenings, marriages and funerals. This is a poor funeral down at the bottom, which you can see the poor family going to mourn their dead. We're going to look at the records, parish registers and a few bishops' transcripts, and the parish chest records. So civil registration in England and Wales started on the 1st of July 1837. When you got married, you were given a marriage certificate. And here is my grandparents. You can see it's the original. First of all, you can see down this side here, it's been torn out of a book that was perforated. And you can also see the stamp duty that has been paid on it. So they had to pay the stamp duty, and then the vicar signs over the stamps to show it was duty paid. But if you look at it, all the writing is exactly the same. Somebody has filled this in. It is a copy, and yet it is the original marriage certificate. So where is the original? That is in the parish register, and there you will see the original signatures of the bride, the groom, the witnesses. In this case, there were 3 witnesses. The bride's brother, no, the groom's brother, the bride's sister, and the bride's father have signed, the one at the top. A birth registration in England looks like this. So this is a birth registration. It is not what we use as a full birth certificate. It has no details of parentage on it, but that document will get you through your life. It's all you need. If you go to school, you go to university, you apply for a passport, this is all you need. So a lot of people don't actually have a full birth certificate. And a full birth certificate actually shows the parents' names, and that's why we always get full birth certificates. But can we find more? Well, the ideal would be to look for the baptism. And here's the baptism, and I'm lucky because the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, the LDS, have put a lot of Lancashire registers online, so I can sit at home and troll through them at no cost till I find what I want. And so here you will see Edith's baptism, my grandmother, and in the far right you will see just the rector has signed at the bottom, but there are 3 names above, and they are the names of the godparents. So the vicar has kindly told me that Edith's mother, Emma, was one of the godmothers. Her aunt, Sarah, was another, and Uncle Herbert Dale was a godfather. So yes, from this parish register, I have actually found out something more. So it is worth it. But as we go back in time, we actually get less information because the rules didn't apply quite the same. They had to write them in the register, but they wrote what they wanted to write. So this is from Mappleton in Yorkshire. And of course, all it says is George Graham of this parish, bachelor, and Hannah Beale of this parish, spinster. And there's all sorts of bleed through and it's a mess, bracketed together by banns and the date. In 1603, there was a change of rules that deemed that the clergy had to keep the marriages separate from the baptisms and the burials. And so from 1603, you got to look in two sorts of registers to find them. But we do get some interesting information. In 1655, this one says, Rowland Prestwich and Anne Thorpe of the parish of Ashover, that's in Derbyshire, was published on 3 several Lord's days in the church in Ashover from May the 20th to June the 3rd, and nothing objected against them by anyone that they may lawfully proceed to marriage, which was performed and done. D-U-N, done, I love it. Banns, Saxon word for proclamation. You can get married by banns, you can get married by license, and after the 1st of July 1837, when civil registration came in, you could get married in a registry office, and they are still today the 3 ways that you can get married. The only change has been that you can now get married in England and Wales in a building that is, well, it's actually a room in a building that is licensed to hold marriages. In New Zealand, you can actually apply and you can get married on the beach and in the woods, wherever you want to, on a boat. In the sky, somebody's got married on an aeroplane. You cannot do that in England. You still have to be in a room that is licensed. So they're called, banns are called on 3 consecutive Sundays at Matins, the morning service. And if anyone complains, then you don't get married. But always check, even after the banns are called, and you've got a copy of that, to see if the marriage took place. This is the banns. It doesn't tell you here that they actually got married, so you would need to check. And here, the vicar has filled in all the details ready for the marriage. His name and her name, where they're living, his occupation, but it hasn't got the 2 fathers' names, but it's got their father's occupation. So we're waiting for the service to take place, and then everyone will sign. Unfortunately, that's blank, but there's some writing at the bottom of the page. And if you don't read the parish register, you would never learn that this marriage was not solemnised because Henry Lees, the father of Mary Lees, forbade it, stating upon oath that his daughter was under age on June the 13th, 1847. So that marriage didn't take place. Hambledon in Wiltshire, sometimes the vicars felt, and even though now it's on printed forms, that we could squeeze something else in for our delight. And it really is for our delight, this one. There it is there, and it says, this is the son of a woman named Draper, who was sold at Colne Market by her husband to Harper, the father of this man. Remember, wife selling? Why did they do it? Because the ordinary person couldn't afford to take out a private member's bill in Parliament to apply for a divorce at the cost of £2,000, probably more money than he would earn in 10 or 15 years. So the only way he could get rid of his unwanted wife, or she wanting to go as well, was to take them to the market and sell them. And you've all read The Mayor of Casterbridge, and you know all about wife selling. The legal age for marriage prior to 1763 was 12 or more for girls and 14 for boys. From 1763, you had to have your parents' consent or your guardian's consent if you were under the age of 21. If I just get rid of that mouse, which is a nuisance. Now, the marriage license. These are a little trickier to find because not all of them have stood the test of time. A copy would be in the hands of the couple, And so that would have to be handed down in your family records, and not many have got those. But this is one from 1819. But if the parties don't wish to have their business publicly announced on 3 consecutive Sundays in church, so everybody knows that he's going to marry her and there'll be great gossip. That was the best bit of the church service, actually, when I went to church regularly, was to listen to who was going to marry whom. Right. If they live in different dioceses, they have to have a license. They can't get married by banns. And if they're not resident in the parish for 3 weeks while the banns are being called, then they have to have a license. And these may have survived in county and diocesan offices. Lord Hardwicke's Act on the 25th of March 1754 is for the better prevention of clandestine marriages. Now, you've all heard about the border marriages up at Gretna Green and various other Lamberton toll booths and things, also the fleet marriages in London, or that you could sail across the channel to Jersey and get married and sail back when you were married and you'd consummated it, and then no one could break you up. Well, it was deemed that the people doing this were usually defrocked vicars, and so Lord Hardwicke wanted to sort this out. The first thing he did was make a separate register for marriages on pre-printed forms with spaces for the signatures of the bride, the groom, the witnesses, and the minister. And the intention, of course, was to make these marriages illegal. And on the day that this came in, so on the 24th of March 1754, there were 2,000 fleet marriages took place on one day in London. Marriage here in 1731, now after Henry VIII, when we became Anglican, the Church of England, everything was to be in English, not in Latin. But some vicars always wanted to show off their prowess. And I research a place called Moor in Daresbury in Derbyshire, and the vicar there for years wrote everything in Latin. So you have to be reasonably, I mean, I didn't take Latin at school, but with the guidebooks that are here on the shelves in the library and at the NZSG, you can work out exactly what was happening. So this is Thomas Fletcher of Moor and Alice Norman of Dutton getting married. The interregnum, that's the period after we've chopped the head off poor old King Charles I, and before Charles II comes on the throne, the country is ruled by Oliver Cromwell. He was a Puritan, and he thought that christenings in church at a font with holy water was totally idolatrous. Therefore, it had to be in a lead basin with ordinary water. And all banns for marriage and the marriage had to take place in the marketplace, not in church. So what happened was the clergy were still there, but just hanging on by the skin of their teeth, as long as they were very low church and there were no incense in the church and things. They would actually bless them, and some of them do a full marriage service, because the people didn't think they were married by the, yes, I do take you, thank you very much, and off they went to do their shopping. And they also introduced a fee from that day for baptisms, which didn't go down very well. And so you can't read this, I'm afraid. It's very small writing. But basically, all the way through, each one of these says, according to the Act. So they are making known that the Act is there. So the vicar was recording the marriages, but they were taking place in the marketplace, not in the church. And again, baptisms during this time clearly says, according to the Act. And here is an interesting record. These were entered chronologically and in order. So we have a marriage, we have baptisms, and we have a block of burials. But they don't happen neat and tidily like that. Neither do they get married in alphabetical order, do they? So you know immediately that this is a copy register, and they've sorted them as they've copied them. So very good if this is all you can get, but you need to try and go back and find the original parish register, just in case there was some more information there. The bishop's transcripts were the copy that are made and they had to be in the bishop's office by Easter of each year. Were they done by the vicar? Were they done by the church wardens? Well, a lot of church wardens couldn't actually read and write. They could speak and they could carry out their duties, but they may not have been able to read and write. So they would just get somebody in the village who could, probably the schoolmaster, to do these copies. They're called bishop's transcripts, and they're held in county record offices. And of course, county record offices, they realised in 1900 that a lot of these records were being destroyed either by water, by rats being eaten, or many churches were using the paper or the parchment to fuel the fire to keep the church warm, and so they had to do something about it. So all the records, once the record books were full, had to be placed either in a hermetically sealed and protected safe in the church, and they couldn't afford that, so they opened county record offices, and thank goodness that's why we have county record offices all over England and Wales for the preservation of church and civil records. On the 28th of July 1812, a man called Mr. Rose again came out with an act for the better regulating and preserving parish and other registers of births, baptisms, marriages and burials in England on a pre-printed form. So you're going to lose any of those comments that we have seen, although some of them actually managed to bend the rules a bit. And here you'll see he's actually managed to record the middle one as illegitimate, so that you know carefully, even though there's no father named and there's no father's occupation, that box is blank. And he's managed to squeeze in the box for the date of the baptism, the date of birth as well. And of course, some people aren't christened for several years. My mother was 7 when she was christened, when her father came home from sea, and 3 of their siblings were all christened together. This is a film, which is why it's black on white, very poorly preserved, but enough for me to see that the second one down, which is George, the son of Thomas and Mary Grime of Great Cowden, which is in East Yorkshire. But you see, there's somebody has kindly saved my bacon by writing alias Graham up above. So these are the things that make research quite a joy to us. Baptisms can be frustrating because you can have, this is between 1738-39, I've blown it up. The women have no place in this. It is just that Hannah, the daughter of Robert Hurst, was baptised. No mum mentioned at all, or William, the son of William Cutt, was baptised. So you've then got to go looking for the marriages of those people to find who the female is. And this one was really interesting, and I always like showing this. This is Sarah Jane Graham, but unfortunately when she was christened, somebody a lot later in 1920, from 1836 to 1926, came along, I'll just blow it up there, and brought an affidavit to say, well, her name isn't Sarah Jane, it's Mary Jane. Now, I've not fathomed this out yet, but when she subsequently got married, she thought she was the vicar thought she was Mary Ann. And then when she signed, it's Mary Jane, so he had to change it. So these are the things that make life, our life, either a headache or that's why we do this hobby. Non-parochial registers. These are all the Methodist, Quaker, Jewish, Roman Catholic, Baptist records, and any other offshoots of them. They were all called in to London by the Registrar General when civil registration started on the 1st of July 1837. They are all held at the National Archives in Kew, and we are forever grateful because they are now all on film. They are actually on film with the LDS, but they are all online at the Genealogist. That's available here in the library for you to use, and it's also at the NZSG as well. I'm just going to show you one register to show you that life isn't all easy. These are the details about members of the Independent Church of Knaresborough up in Yorkshire. It's a bit difficult to read, but he explains that somebody is a very shining Christian. That's nice. And here he's gone back over what he's written, and he records. So over on the right in 1812, on that first line, he's written something that someone was received into the church, and then at the end of it, he's put died, 1819. So that's another piece of information if that's your family. But then this register deteriorates. This was lovely. This is the minister making comments. He's put about them being dead. And then here we have received Henry and William Kemp, both almost deaf and the former quite blind, but both with monuments of mercy and brands plucked out of the fire. Now, if you know what that means, I'd be grateful if you would explain it. But I gave, I hope, to glory. So they died. But then when we turn over, he's deteriorated into a form of shorthand that I can tell you that the best shorthand typists in New Zealand and in England and back in Yorkshire, none of us can translate and read. So we don't know what this page actually says. A Quaker marriage takes place in the meeting. Now, anyone who wants to get married in a Quaker church, they apply to the meeting when they say who's going to marry, and they are then investigated to make sure that they're not first cousins, there's no impropriety, any reasons why they can't get married. They get married in the meeting, and everyone in that meeting becomes a witness to that wedding, and they are charged with making sure that it's a very happy and long marriage. Rosie's Act of 1812 intended to standardise the registers and stop the extra information, but before that we get some wonderful gems, and this is what we all like seeing. This is Hambleton in Wiltshire, 1806. Sophia Gatcombe, baseborn son of Charlotte Bernard. So already you found a child's name because she's given a different name to her child. And you can follow that line through. Or this one, which gets more intrigue, Charles, the reputed son of Daniel Wall, by Mary, the wife of John Coleman, in HM service, and supposed now to be in Jersey. So while the cat's away, the mice will play. Or Aaron, the son of Olivia Draper, who was sold by William Draper, her husband at Carl Market, to James Harper, her brother-in-law, with whom she now most shamefully cohabits. Now these we lose when we standardise the registers. As you can see, burials after 1812, no cause of death, no spouse, no parents, just their name, their occupation, where they were living, how old they were. You might get occupation and you might not. This vicar hasn't put any of that in. You can see there I've blown it up. We have one interesting burial time, and that's between 1668 and 1815. And this is a national thing. You know that as genealogists, we all look at social history, economic history as well. It really increases our knowledge. And so here we have the fight for the woolen industry that has been the main staple industry of Britain from time immemorial. But all of a sudden, America is flooding the market with cotton. And we need to stop that. Well, how best to stop it than to admit that from now we have an act, the Burial in Wool Act, which says, no corpse of any person, except those who die with the plague, don't want to know them, shall be buried in any shift, sheet, shroud, or anything whatsoever made or mingled with flax, hemp, silk, hair, gold, or silver, or any stuff or anything other that is not made of sheep's wool, and only on pain of forfeiture of £5. So you had to take an affidavit after the funeral into the church to swear that the deceased had been buried in wool. And so you found that the upper echelon, well, they paid the £5. It was of absolutely no consequence. And burying them in cotton was much nicer than burying them in wool, apparently. But here you find the burial registers quite clearly say that they are buried according to the Act, and the affidavit was brought into the church. And here is the affidavit from Luton, for Susanna Punter to say, and I love the little skeleton at the top, that the person has filled in. That's not on all of them, but it was on the ones in Luton, to say that she was buried in wool. They introduced in 1697 a duty. This is the Crown trying to raise money. And so 2 shillings for a birth. That is absolutely horrendous. It could be more than somebody earned in a quarter of a year or a half a year. It's a lot of money. So what you have to remember is they may not get christened. And so if you can't find them, that might be the reason, because they're not paying. And 2 and 6 for a marriage, and 4 shillings on the burial of all non-paupers. And that's quite a lot of money as well. We leave the births, deaths and marriages, and we now look at the parish chest records. Vestry minutes, churchwardens' accounts, what are they? They're the accounts of the maintenance of the parish. All the roads, all the bridges coming in and going out of the parish. The collection and distribution of the poor rate, the preparation of jury lists, the lists of men over the age of 15 who can fight for the county and the country, and the support of the workhouse when they were built. Some parishes couldn't support their own, so you have sort of cooperating workhouses covering several parishes. The administration of the parish has always been in the hands of its inhabitants, and when the manor broke down in the 14th century, the church and the vestry took over this responsibility. The vestry is the name of the meeting. It's the room where the meeting takes place. And this is a picture of quite a unique vestry. It's actually been built outside the church. This is in Cinderhill in Nottingham. Right, the appointments to the vestry are usually voluntary, and after a year's service, settlement in that parish will be granted. This is a lovely picture in 1911 of St Bees in Cumbria of the parish council, and you will see there's a definite lack of women. Who are the parish officials? 2 churchwardens responsible for all activities in the parish and the church property. The constable to maintain law and order in the parish. The overseer responsible for the accounts of the parish. He's the treasurer. The beagle, the parish constable of the Anglican Church, and one often charged with the duties of charity and looking after the workhouse and the orphanage. Remember, the workhouse was also the old people's home, and it's also where either the children with no parents or with children with parents who couldn't look after them, where they were put. The rat catcher, keep the place clean and tidy. The waywarden, responsible for all the highways. You've got tide waiters if they're on the coast. There's loads of other duties. The first page of the vestry minutes of St Botolph in Aldgate shows that on the 22nd day of June 1786, these were the people all listed, and they are all listed on the page there. So you can find, because everybody did take a turn, if they were reasonably well off, that they took a turn on one of these duties. Here we have in 1806 that Edward Lomas has gone to the vestry because he wants his cottage back, but it's been lent out to somebody called Bowen Brown, but he wants to sell it, and they've agreed that he can do so. And that's been signed by the clerk of the meeting, John Gregory. When I found this, I was really thrilled because those 3 are actually first cousins. They're all on my tree. Here's the house. Here's the farm, which until last year was still in the hands of the family, which was rather exciting. And now we get a lot of them online. How many of you have looked for them online? This one is at Kirk Newton. Fundraising. The parish needs to raise, the church has to raise money. How did they do it? Well, they have things, really weird things, like the church ale. This is a sobriety time, but the farmer would gift barley to the church, and that was quite common. The church reeve would hare the barley, brew the ale, and then sell it to raise money. And they had great ale tastings, otherwise known as a big boozy-doo. And that money would raise money towards the upkeep of the church. They kept bees, and this is in Harpday in Gloucester, and you'll see the lovely bee hives. They were brick, along there. They kept the honey, they kept the bees for honey and also for the wax for the church candles. In my parish in Heswell in Cheshire, they sold the pews. They lent out pew rentals, and they're all listed in the records. These for Kirk Newton are up on the website, so you can see where everyone was actually sitting. And you can see, although there's a picture of the church, there are 2 aisles in the church and 3 rows of pews. A few years ago, the only records you could get online or on film at the LDS for Cheshire were the church records other than births, deaths and marriages, because the Bishop of Chester wouldn't let the Mormons film those records. And in desperation one day I was looking, what can I look at? And I found cow rental accounts. And I thought, oh, we'll have a look at those. So I discovered, and then I had to do research, because there's my fellow there, George Meyer, renting out 3 cows. So he brings these, or he says, right, I'll lend out 3 for a year, at 3 groats a year. So he gets 3 groats for those, to a poor person, a good and a godly parishioner, and that means that that family will have a house cow and have milk for the family. But the classic is that the parishioner had to care for the cow and bring him into church every Easter Sunday to make sure that it was being well cared for. I wonder who cleared up afterwards. The poor rate. This is where you find the upper echelon, those people who can afford the poor rate and those people who are receiving it. Not very easy on here to, it's just the layout for you to have a look at. Some of them, again, are online, so you can see them here. This is Shalfleet in the Isle of Wight. That's telling you how many houses, how many men, how many people are in the parish. And then there's a list of their names and how much rent they are paying and how much rates they're paying to the church. This one is also online, and this is for Doddington in Northumberland. And not only is it sort of one payment, it's the 4 payments through the year. So it's quarterly. And this one is the Church Wardens of Morpeth. Then we come to tithe assessments, because in 1835 we have the enclosures and we have people now paying land tax. So this is Brassington in Derbyshire, and here this is my 4th time's great-grandfather, and he has all those properties in this village. So we can find them today when we go. We can have a look at them. We can find them on a map, and it tells us how much tax he was paying on them. Here's the tithe map, and I've highlighted in red all his properties. And the property that's numbered 569 is a rather large field. It's called Jinsey's Jolly, and it is now owned by my cousin. This is the 6th generation. They still own it. Every 2 years, Andrew has to go and stand on that piece of land and claim it back in the name of the Watson family. And it's always been open for anyone to graze their horses or their sheep or their cows on, and it's still like that today. Here's a modern map showing you where exactly those same places are, so you can go and see them today. We're going to now look at the documents of the Poor Law, and why are they in the parish chest records. The Poor Law records cover settlement papers, removal orders, examinations, and apprenticeship records. These are parish apprenticeships, not private apprenticeships. They all had to go to the quarter sessions or the petty sessions, which quarter sessions every quarter of the year on the 4 days of the year, Lady Day, St. Michaelmas Day. It's supposed to be Christmas Day, but they moved that one because they don't want it on Christmas Day. And the copy of those records are held in the parish chest records if they've survived. But the quarter session records have survived in county record offices because they are civil records. So if you don't find them in one, have a look in the other. In 1662 was the Settlement Act, and it was called the Act for the Better Relief of the Poor of this Kingdom. The Act was to establish which parish a person belonged. It was their parish of settlement, And so that parish was responsible for them when they could no longer care for themselves, whether they had an accident, whether they'd be maimed, whether they were infirm or whatever. Also, if they were born there illegitimately, then the parish had to look after them. So you can guess what happened. All pregnant women who were having an illegitimate child were removed as much as they could. This is an early settlement certificate, not necessarily because there's a hole in it, but it doesn't give a lot of details about the family. It is really the administration of this person is settled in this parish, and he would take that with him. He would fold it up, put it in his pocket, and when he goes to his new parish where he's going to work, he would have to hand it in to the parish officials. They would hold it in the parish chest until he became chargeable on that parish, when they would then go to court, to the Court of Sessions, and have him removed, because they didn't want to pay the upkeep on him when he didn't belong to them. Okay, so this is what this is all about. So this certificate here allows John Alchin to move from Leybourne to East Malling in Kent. Probably next door. I'm not quite sure. You'd have to look on a map. The laws of settlement after 1662 gave you very clear instructions about settlement. If you were born in that parish, that is your primary parish of settlement. No one can take that from you. But you can move your parish of settlement by various means. If you are hired continually for more than a year and a day in a new parish, then you can apply for parish of settlement in that parish. And that means what happened was a lot of people didn't want to do that. So they actually only were hired for 1 day less than a year. So it meant shorter contracts on employment. In order to have legal settlement, apart from being born there, the other reasons were if you held a parish office for more than a year. So the church warden, the overseer, the constable, the field master, the way warden, the rat catcher, they could all have settlement in a new parish. If you had paid a rent on a property of more than £10 a year, or you paid taxes on a property of more than £10 a year, then you could have settlement in that parish. To have married a man who had settlement in a new parish, you could have settlement in that parish as long as he lived. After that, when he died, you get biffed out back to your parish of birth. Think about that one. Previously, if you've received relief for some reason from that parish, then you could have settlement in that parish. And if you've served a 7-year apprenticeship, someone like to turn their phone on? No? Okay, that's good. If you've served a 7-year apprenticeship, you can have settlement in that new parish. And this has great implications, as we'll quickly have a look at. 1729, this is a settlement certificate. You can see there's been a little bit of square paper placed over the seals of the two justices of the peace. But they have put their seal. Their seal is their signet ring. You know, men wore signet rings and then put wax on the page and then press their seal in. Thomas Fulfer and his family had settled, they've got settlement in All Saints in Hertford, but they've moved into the parish of Datchworth in Hertfordshire. So they've presented this document to say that they can come, but if they are chargeable, then they have to be removed back to All Saints in Hertford. There can be examinations. Why are you living in our parish? And these are fascinating. These will give you the family history. These will tell you, as this one does, where this man was born, who his parents were, how long he has worked here, here, and here. Right down to the end, it will tell you who his wife is, how his children are, what their names are, and what their ages are. This is why these are so invaluable to us. So you can see there, I'm not easy reading here, but his wife was called Sarah, and he had 4 children. William, I can't see, upwards of
4 years, so.
Okay, and then James and, yeah, but it's to the light shining on it, so I can't read it, I'm sorry. Now we have a removal order. So here's Boys Simons, Boys is his Christian name, his wife Martha and their children, Boys 11, Edward 6, James 5, Hester Mary 7. Now they've become chargeable on Marden Parish in Kent. So the church wardens have gone to the quarter sessions to have him removed back to his parish of settlement, which is Chatham in Kent. And he will be escorted that day off out of the county boundary by the Beagle and sent home. We don't want you. And this is lovely, I love this. In 1801, Nancy Fankert, a single woman with child. So very quickly they managed to go to the quarter sessions to get her removed because she has settlement in Marden in Kent, but she's wandered into Yalding. So they've removed her back before she has the child, so the child doesn't get born in that county and have settlement and chargeable on that parish. That was 1801. But by 1806, again, Nancy Fankert is up before them, and again she's pregnant, and she's still unmarried, and she's wandered back into Yalding, and so she's going to be removed again back into Marden. This removal order is very sad. In 1808, James Farris, illegitimate child of Anne Farris, has been taken into Marden, but is chargeable on Benenden. That's where he was born. So he was removed, but his mother wasn't. Examinations take on various, they go to the justices and they are asked, why do you think you need to have settlement in this parish? Where do you really think that you belong? So this was in Butterley in Devon. And then we come to parish apprenticeships. This is the indenture, and as you can see, it's all wiggly along the top. It is cut that way for a reason, because one indenture is kept by the officials, and the other part of it is given to the apprentice. And only when he gets both parts back will that apprentice be free. So that's why it's that lovely wiggly line. It hasn't been ripped and you think, oh, this has all been worn away. There is a reason for it. So this is Charles Earle, a poor child of Thwaite, and he's being taken out of his parish that he knows where he was born, and he's been apprenticed until he is 21 years to John Clark of Barningham in Norfolk, which is right across the other part of the county. So he's going to be in pastures new. Anne Lee, aged 12, she was required to serve apprenticeship, usually as a house servant, the girls, that's what they got, until she was 21, so from 12 to 21, and she couldn't marry until she was free. So, this is Anne Lee, and who was she apprenticed to? Well, she was apprenticed to the vicar, Reverend Willings, but he wasn't willing, and he refused to take her. Now, I don't know if he refused because she was a young girl and he lived on his own as a vicar and didn't want that responsibility. So he actually was fined for £10 for not taking a parish apprentice. So these are all the lovely things. This came from Shropshire Archives. So you can see they're all over the country. Joseph Eccleston was apprenticed to William Lee in the parish of Chad in Shrewsbury. And Lee abused Joseph frequently, beating him in a cruel manner. And Joseph managed one day to escape out of the house and go and tell somebody, who marched him immediately off to the justices. And so he was released from his apprenticeship. And so that's what the back of the document actually tells you. Now this is a case that if you can't find your family, you need to think about where these children could have gone. I've actually done a thesis on this, and I don't have time to do it in great detail, but I'll just give you an outline of a couple. The churchwardens of Essex actually sent children who could be chargeable on the parish up to the woolen mills of Lancashire and Yorkshire. Children were sent from London, apart from them being sent to Virginia, which was a lot further in America. They were also sent to the Paisley Mills in Edinburgh. Boys were sent to Grimsby to be fishermen. Okay, and no choice about it. But I've just done one survey, and that is on the Chelmsford parish. So at the vestry minutes in 1799, the agent from Douglas & Co. of Pendleton approached the church wardens and said, we're running out of child labour, we need more. Basically because the children had to run under all the looms, as the looms are doing this. And of course, they got their ears chopped off and their arms chopped off and maimed, and they couldn't work, so they were very replaceable. So they needed some more children. So they looked around in the parish workhouse and they said, oh yes, we've got some children. So 13 were sent. We actually have the apprenticeship records for these children, and they're in Essex Record Office. You can see there's a Catherine Smith and an Elizabeth Smith, 10 and 7. Now they were sent from Essex, 150 miles up to Pendleton in Lancashire. They took 3 days to get there. They did so on the back of, we've got explanations, just on a flat top horse-drawn truck. They got there. They got there at night. They were divided into two. Half went on night shift and the other half were put to bed. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, they swapped over. The night shift went to the same bed, got into the same bed, and the others were put on to work. They were given one outfit to work in and one outfit for Sunday because the church wardens wanted them to attend church. But as they worked 7 days a week with no days off, that wasn't going to happen. And they had the irritating habit of growing out of their clothes or wearing them out. So they also wore their church clothes out, and they couldn't go to church because they had nothing decent to go in. Somehow, Catherine Smith's mother found out about the treatment of the children, and she appealed to Chelmsford to actually go and see her children. And they gave her the money to go, and she went, and she came back and said they were being most shamefully abused, that they were in rags, that they didn't see daylight, they didn't have any education, they weren't being even taught their letters. Normally children were taught letters by the vicar or the curate at church services on a Sunday in Sunday school. This wasn't happening. So the parish was a bit confused, so they sent the beagle. And of course the beagle worked for the parish. He came back and said, stuff and nonsense, they're fine, nothing wrong with them at all. What it actually meant was that Chelmsford no longer sent children out of the parish. They employed all the children in the parish after that date. Here's the surviving indenture for Elizabeth Smith, who was 7 at the time, and some of the others. Joseph Wybrow returned home after 8 years. He ran away and said, right, I'm back. This is to Chelmsford. And Chelmsford overseers said, no, you've been out of our parish for more than 5 years. You now have settlement in Eccles, which is where Pendleton is, big parish of Eccles, go back. So he couldn't look after his widowed mother. He had to go. Whereas John Maddox was a bit more wily. He ran away after 6 weeks from Pendleton. He hired himself out on day hire only and makes that very clear in his examination. And then he worked his way down back to London, and he joined the army. And the army has no parish of settlement. It is open. Therefore, the 12 years that he was in the army are fine. So when he turned up back in Chelmsford to look after his aging mother, they welcomed him with open arms. Where do we look for these records? Family Search. This is the LDS site. Go to the Family History Library catalogue. Look for your parish. Don't write this down. There are some handouts, okay? Look for your parish and then church records. Order the film in to a family history centre, into here at the Central Auckland Research Centre, or in the NZSG in Panmure. Search the internet. The National Archives has Discovery, and on Discovery, right down at the bottom of the page, you now have a button for all other archives in the country. It used to be called Access to Archives, A2A, and now they've moved it. We all loved A2A, but they've just changed it. So, and I do apologise, because I've just seen when I was reading this before, I've forgotten to change the A2A. But if you go to National Archives, look for Discovery, their catalogue, which you will get automatically, you'll see it down at the bottom. The county record offices for every county in England and Wales. Find My Past, Ancestry, and the Genealogist. But we also have free sites like volunteer transcription sites. Have you all looked at Free Reg? Like we've all used Free BDM, well, Free Reg or Free Sen looks after the census. These are transcriptions and they're free. Family Search, I just keyed in Cheshire, and you can see these are all the parish records I can look at for Cheshire. Those without a camera are just indexed. Those with a camera beside them, the little black dot is probably what you see on the right, I can actually troll through the records, the actual registers, and find the records. On Ancestry, the London Metropolitan Archive, which covers the whole of Greater London, basically anything inside the M25. So if you look at a map of London, you see the big blue circle. Anything inside that, the records more than likely are at London Metropolitan Archive. They've been given to Ancestry, and so you can find quite easily through the index. Just beware of spelling mistakes and transcription errors, that's all. And the other one is Find My Past, and I apologise. I made this a week ago. Find My Past has changed the website, so it doesn't quite look like this any longer, which is always a problem when we make these presentations. But it tells you what you need to know. There is a special collections for various counties for England and Wales, as well as you can look at the births, marriage and death and parish records, which is on the left. Transcriptions are available through parish record societies, family history societies, individuals and online. A lot have been published. This library is full of them. Do go and have a look at the books on the shelves and in the CDs, and also on microfiche. And I keep hearing people say, oh, I haven't got time to look at the microfiche. But, you know, it does take a few minutes just to get the hang of looking at microfiche or at the CD, but you'll find there's a wealth of information there. Individuals have done many transcriptions, and a lot now are available online. One of the organisations put together a collection of what they've called online parish clerks. They've called themselves that. They're not official parish clerks that I've been talking about. They're calling themselves online parish clerks. And for these counties, some of them have got their records there for you to search. Others, you email the parish clerk and they will answer your query, which is very good. They will do a lookup for nothing. Look at Genuki, which is Genealogical Information UK and Ireland, which I've given you the website in the handout. Select the country, select the county, select the topic. So here's the main website, Genuki. So select England. That's an interactive map, so you can go onto the map or you can find the words on the left or the right. I've just chosen Devon and gone to Up Ottery to see what's there. My family is called Finnemore in Devon. So it comes up with all these banns and baptisms, marriages and burials, and they're all hyperlinked, so that means they take me from there to a database. And so key in the name, Finnemore, and it came up with 2, and I thought, no, it should come up with a lot more. And then I remembered you can spell Finnemore in about 5 different ways. So who was doing the spelling? Well, that was a parish clerk as he heard it. And if they've come into the county or into the village, it might have a very, even in Devon, there are different accents in Devon, so you need to be aware of that. So this is very interesting because this looks as though Francis, who is the cattle doctor or the veterinarian, is having children for over 30 years, which is lovely for him, but wow. His wife is called Elizabeth, and I thought that was really rather strange. And when I really started looking, he married a second time. Elizabeth died, and he married another lady called Elizabeth. So you do need to watch out for that. And here is a classic in the burials to show that Francis died spelt with an E, and his wife died spelt, his first wife, that is, spelt with an I. So you've got to also take your blinkers off when looking at spelling of surnames. Free Reg is very useful. It's only a transcription. You don't get the parish register, but here it is. So I've just shown you here, I'm doing Kent and I'm looking for Dockery. And there they are there. and it tells me that they are at Dartford. Now that's all it says there, but Dartford is part of the Medway collection. That's right along the northwest coast of the Thames, out in Kent. So if you look at the parish registers and you go and find them, you click on St Mary's, click on the time that you want, and whether you want burials, marriages or baptisms, and then that's what you get. A list of JPEGs. So you've got to think, right, well I've said I want halfway through that block. So you click on it and then you go backwards and forwards, and there it is, and it's free. That saves you a lot of money, saves you, $20,000 from going there to look, because here it is and it's free. So you can search these while you're watching telly. So this is the one we wanted, and there she is, Lucy Ann to Robert Thornton and Mary Ann Dockery, and he was a victualler, he was also a market gardener. And ladies and gentlemen, I've run out of time. This is normally a 3.5-hour workshop, which I've just managed to do in 1 hour and 5 minutes. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you have fun.